Hi, I'm Adam. In my role, I get to meet some pretty exceptional thought leaders. This week's guest is no exception. Today, I speak with Stephan Thieringer, founder of the Human Innovation Garage, to discuss the importance of employee experience and how vision and passion drive employees to achieve greater results. He also ties employee experience to letting your teenager borrow your Mercedes. Stay tuned for more. Stephan, thank you for taking the time to connect. It's great to have you here. Really, certainly appreciate the time.
Good to be here. Thank you, Adam.
So, in sort of looking at your background and experience, it's obvious that you're no stranger to success and accolades. You've worked across industries in technology, in education, and in hospitality, lending your expertise at MIT and at Suffolk University as an adjunct professor. You've earned various management and leadership awards. So you founded several businesses, including the Human Innovation Garage. And I'm curious, given your background, could you speak to what got you to where you are today and your experiences generally?
So you said the keyword human. And if there's one thing which is a consistent path through my entire career and also where I started, which was hospitality, which ultimately ended up that way in the United States, is people. And that's really also the whole theme around Human Innovation Garage, right? The inherent beauty of what we have within us, recognizing that in the human being, taking those inherent brilliant pieces, innovating around them, and then really providing from our side tool sets, resources, tools what we've developed over the course of my work and the body of work that I've developed along neuroscientific research, etc., but then also using technology platforms such as BI and really supporting with deep data and people analysis kind of how we align ultimately people and talent strategy.
Yeah, that's an interesting alignment, right? And I think it dovetails into some of the conversations that we've had thus far around kind of that alignment of people and people strategy to a business strategy. A recent addition to the PI software has been a strategy assessment that part of this, it's part of our design solution. It helps senior leaders align around 20 key points to come to a consensus as to what they're pursuing and frankly what they're also not pursuing, that helps them align to a set of specific goals, which then in turn helps senior leadership kind of determine and roll out to their people to align a talent strategy to that they can then succinctly articulate to the organization. And this kind of brings me to the idea of vision. When you can help create that alignment, it lends to better success typically. Right. Without vision, there's a stronger, without vision, there's a tougher alignment to moving forward. And even if there is a vision, if it's not clear to everyone from senior leadership all the way down to the junior individual contributor, it's harder to achieve those results. So when working with your clients, executives, how do you ensure that employees at all levels of an organization understand the vision and where that company's going?
Let me start really by vision, because I think there's a huge amount of complexity in vision when CEOs, chairmen, presidents of organizations, founders of small organizations, when they talk about vision, and you ask them, well, what is the vision of the company? And what it really pulls down to, and where clarity, consistency, and discipline, really going back to a famous book, Start With Why, of Simon Sinek, who's a local guy to Boston as well, out of Brandeis, where it really pulls down to is, what is my belief system? And how do I explain, transmit, and communicate that with clarity, consistency, and discipline? It's a little bit like, and I say it in a lot of my talks, it's a little bit like when the young teenager asks their parents for the car. It doesn't matter if it's Monday night, Friday night, Saturday night, or Sunday night. If it is an S550 Mercedes, the answer is always the same. It's, you're not getting the car, and the expectation and the anticipation the human being has, meaning the teenager, is consistently the same because the answer is consistently the same. So that speaks a little bit to kind of that piece. How do leaders, how do managers, how does an executive communicate that? And to the second part of your question, I think going back to the software piece, which we now have available, the beauty of it is we now are able to align what is my belief system, but then also how does my competency in being able to be clear, consistent, and disciplined about it, how does that play into the organization? And that's, I think, where we oftentimes, from a senior executive level, from a core team in an organization, where we lose it. where we say, wow, you know what, that is something where we're not really clear. And then also we don't know from executive to executive, how do we complement each other? And that core alignment also in terms of the competency, which is not education, it's not knowledge, it's kind of the triangulation of the two. How does that play into the execution within the company, the business strategy, and ultimately impacting the result?
When you talk about vision and sort of communicating that to your organization, it leads to sort of the second or maybe third component that you touch on here, which I think is passion, right? And getting things implemented. Vision ensures that people understand what's going on, but it's maybe a coin flip as to whether or not they're going to A, agree, and B, commit. But I think when it comes to sort of execution, there's a certain component of passion in there. But oftentimes I would think that you're working with clients, helping them to develop these strategies around their people, communicate those strategies out. How receptive are they with maybe that initial conversation when they're not sure of how to get to A to B and the sort of natural human hesitance around change?
You know, I think like any conversation, I think the one thing is we have to understand that different people come out of different backgrounds. There's different experiences, different emotional stages behind it, different education, and different environments that you come out of, that I come out of. And the big word, I think, in any dialogue, in any kind of, if that's a sales process, if that's an education process, the big word I always like to use is curiosity. And as long as I'm curious about you, you're curious about me, and there's an openness, there's a receptive piece there that allows me to explore, that allows me to discover. And I think it doesn't need to be, well, here's the prescriptive how we exactly do it, but the openness to be receptive and saying, well, interesting. There's validity in your position, there's validity in the discussion, there's validity in your argument or the point you're looking to make to me. Let's explore that. And that usually is the offset of a journey. Any journey, there needs to be the willingness to, we're going to go on a trip, let me pack the suitcase. I don't know where we're going to end up, where we're going to ultimately, how we get there, if it's going to rain or the sun is shining, but we're going to go on the journey. And I think that's the biggest piece where people, at that initial phase of engagement, if you're able to manifest that dialogue, the willingness to be curious, to explore, the rest is really then very situational.
It being situational, what sort of checkpoints do you use to ensure that, hey, we've implemented X or Y or Z, there has been some change, maybe some growing pains along with that. How do you ensure that employees come in kind of excited to adopt and embrace that change and carry out on that new strategy?
So what we see in corporate today, mid and large size corporations a lot, is active disengagement. Right, so disengagement in a sense of, I'm making the choice that I rather go on Twitter, I go on Facebook, I go somewhere else. And the typical example we all know where we're looking for directions to go to a cocktail reception, and while we're looking for directions on Google, an ad pops up, which tells us about the next diving trip in the Bahamas. And before we know it, we're on the site looking for watches and buying the next Suunto watch because we need that. And then 45 minutes later, we finally get the directions, which could have taken us 3 minutes. So I think the permission I give my environment to distract me, but also the stimuli which are around me, which are distracting me, is a huge factor today. We need to look at that and that component of how well an employee is able to keep attention, but what's the environment also we're setting up around it. We need to look at that in a very, very significant manner. And then really the emotional commitment of the employee to the impact of the company. How well are they really engaged? How well are they really emotionally vested into the success of the business? And I think that's, passion is such an interpretation of find your passion. Well, find your whatever. Well, you know, we were so quick to say that. But if I would define for you, define for me passion. Well, 20 different people will be 45 different answers. But if I say to you, are you emotionally invested into the company? There's some very small checkpoints. From an organizational standpoint, an employee engagement survey. And surveys which are not just designed by a human resource team, but there is scientific foundation which says, you know what, how we measure employee engagement is, are you thinking in the morning when you get ready, are you thinking about your first business meeting? Are you committed to go to bed early when you know you have a big presentation the next day? Those are some very basic and fundamental checkpoints, but these are things where if we're looking kind of at syncopatic analytics and saying, well, this is what it is and this is what it's not, and there's some symptomatic signs that we have a diagnosis in one way or the other, that's a big part of that.
It's really interesting. I do certainly appreciate your insights and taking the time to sort of share them with us today. Really great spending some time with you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for watching. For more on how you and your clients can empower their employees through vision and passion, check out our blog post on discretionary effort.